Thank you all for being here. This is the second session of our Wounds That Don't Bleed and Still We Rise webinar series about trauma and resilience. And we're glad that people are with us today. And so my name is Hannah Hutton, and I am a Middle East Fellow at CMEP. Churches for Middle East Peace, or CMEP, is a coalition of 36 denominations and organizations, and we exist to educate, elevate, and advocate. So one of the ways we do that is through webinars like this. This is part of our And Still We Rise Women's Empowerment Initiative, named for Maya Angelou's poem, And Still I Rise. This program hopes to create a safe space for women to build community, invite transformation, and take action. We are so glad that you're here. This is our second session, and we're going to be talking about some of the finer aspects of trauma, and then also learning some embodiment practices to help us come back to our bodies when we have experienced trauma. So I'm going to do some bios real quick. Hilde Zarmuth is one of our panelists today. She's going to lead us through embodiment practices. She was born and raised in Amman, Jordan, to a Palestinian refugee family from Beit Jala. She moved to live in Palestine in 1999 and pursued her BA degree in business administration and marketing from Bethlehem University. Hilde worked in business and nonprofit sectors for 10 years before she got certified as a yoga teacher in power yoga. And she's fantastic. You all are going to be so blessed by the embodiment practices that she shares with us today. She's the mother of 2 boys, and she aspires to take the people on a journey of self-discovery through yoga to see their new way of being and helping to make change in the Holy Land. Hilde is also super passionate about peace and justice, and we're just so happy that she's here today. Next, we have Colleen Sharka. She's a licensed mental health counselor, spiritual director, and director of replication and trauma education for the Roxbury Presbyterian Church Social Impact Center in Boston, Massachusetts. She co-founded Can We Talk, community sharing on trauma and healing, with Reverend Liz Walker, a nationwide collective of 15 sites that are spiritually inspired, community-based, clinically supported programs addressing America's epidemic of post-traumatic stress and grief through the healing power of sharing personal stories. She has created a spiritually integrated trauma education curriculum that is offered in many formats to the community at large, nonprofit organizations, first responders, healthcare workers, and those who identify as caregivers. She previously served as assistant director of Trinity Boston Counseling Center, Trinity Church in Copley Square, where she developed trauma-informed training for mental health interns. She has over 22 years of clinical experience specializing in trauma healing and the integration of psychotherapy and spirituality, and we're so blessed to have her wisdom here with us today. And then last but not least is Dana Baker, and she is part of the Can We Talk network. And she has over 30 years of experience in urban and multicultural ministry in Greater Boston. She served on the staff of Grace Chapel, a non-denominational multi-site church in Lexington, Massachusetts, for 18 and a half years until March of 2019, when she left to begin consulting with Can We Talk, a monthly gathering that provides a safe space for people to share their pain and in a caring community of peer support. As a replication associate, she trains and mentors teams for new Can We Talk replication sites in New England and across the country. She has a Master's of Divinity from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and was ordained in June of 2017. She also served on the board of directors for Mosaic's Global Network from 2008 to 2016, Unite Boston from 2016 to 2020, and Evangelicals for Justice from 2017 to 2020. And prior to joining the staff at the church, Dana was an architect for 20 years. And Dana is a part of our And Still We Rise leadership team, as well as Ilda. And we're just so thankful to all of these ladies for being here today. So I'm going to turn it over to Dana, and it's going to be a wonderful hour together.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I want to add my welcome to everybody alongside Hannah's, and we just are so incredibly grateful to be here today. As Hannah said, this is the second of a three-part webinar series, but as I was preparing, I went back to the overall title, the common title that they share, Wounds That Don't Bleed. And the thinking behind that phrase is that sometimes, and often actually, we are wounded in ways that are not easily seen by others. These wounds and scars actually at first glance seem invisible. Emotional wounds can be hard to discern, and we're often hesitant ourselves to make them visible because it may not feel safe to share them with others. But if we learn to look closer, if we learn to listen deeply, we will be able to begin to recognize those wounds, and that's what today is about. Before we actually jump into this particular webinar, because I know some people that are on here may not have had a chance to see the first of the series that was last Thursday, I just wanted to give a very brief overview because it was such an incredibly powerful time. Our Palestinian sisters have experienced significant trauma and grief, and given the system of oppression that they live under, and so they often feel isolated. So the first webinar last Thursday featured three speakers who did such a remarkable job in helping us to understand how we might come alongside and help them to break that sense of isolation through something called embodied solidarity. That was the title of the first webinar. Arij Masood, who lives in Palestine, spoke about the need for practical solidarity in order to resist the feelings of despair that can sometimes come from this isolation. She affirmed that a platform like this webinar gave her a place to find more of the right words to be able to express what she was feeling and express her experiences. It gave her, she said, a space to breathe. And even more importantly, a platform to be seen and to be heard. Reverend Liz Walker shared about her trip to Bethlehem and Jericho for the ASWR Summit last November and the need for us in other parts of the world to bear witness to what's happening in Palestine, to awaken a sense of urgency. I love that because sometimes we can lose that sense of urgency that the men and women in Palestine feel every day about the needs there. And to grieve collectively. Embodied solidarity helps us to resist cynicism because we know we're not alone. And then finally, Pastor Sander Van Opstal shared about how embodied solidarity means that we show up for one another with our bodies, our minds, and our hearts. And in that solidarity, we together can resist the fear and chaos I loved her phrase, that's the currency of empires, and replace it with love and faith instead. She quoted 1 Timothy where it says that God does not give us a spirit of fear. And so this love and faith can help replace that spirit of fear. We need to see God, and we often see God at work when we show up for one another. So if you weren't there last week, I encourage you to reach out to CMAP and get a link to that recording because it was a powerful time together. And so now we turn to today, the second part of our hopes for this webinar series. People don't understand trauma often. I mean, most people don't understand trauma and the effects it has on our daily functioning or how to begin healing. And notice the word begin. Healing is a journey. It's not necessarily a destination, especially in a place like Palestine, where the traumatic stress is ongoing on a daily basis. And also, people don't know how to walk alongside with someone going through trauma. We often try to jump in and fix or do other things. And really, what they need is a companion in the journey. And also, tools to be able to help them to build resilience and solidarity. And so that's our hope for today, is that we're going to give you context and that we're going to give you tools so that you can walk through this journey. So with that, I want to invite before we actually jump into what some of those tools are, I wanted Ilda and Colleen, you heard a little bit in their bio of how did each of you start to recognize and see the pain that's so hard for us to sometimes see in others? And then why did you make a choice to actually move from different careers and different things like that in order to be able to invest in becoming equipped about how to respond? So Ilda first.
Well, thank you, Dana and Hannah. I'm very grateful to be here with all of you today. So back to your question, it was when I realized my own trauma. I was born and raised as, in my bio, as Hannah read, I was born and raised in Amman, Jordan. And I feel I had a very peaceful, normal childhood. It was, I was a lucky child to live in a place where there was no war, no conflict, nothing. And as I moved here with my family after after my dad applied to come back to live here back in 1999, the second intifada started, and that's when I realized, actually, I didn't realize back then. It was when I was in the States. I did one of my trainings was in Eastern Mennonite University, and I started getting to know more about trauma. And that's when I realized I never had a direct traumatic experience, but it was actually a secondary experience through what I'm seeing and where I am living. And that was an eye-opening for me. So back then I started also learning more about trauma. And then what made me realize the importance of using it is that we still live in a traumatic experience. It's ongoing. And it was a will, a wish for me to, as much as these tools helped me through the different practices that I'm integrating in my daily life, to help others. And so that's how my journey started, to work with women in refugee camps, to work with young girls in juvenile homes. So the list is long, but that's how it started when I realized my own trauma.
And Colleen, how about you? What was that journey like for you?
Well, first of all, like Ilda, I just am so grateful and honored to be here today in this company of all of you and anyone who's listening. I had to think about this, and it definitely started back as a child being raised up in New Hampshire. And my mother's side of the family is French Canadian, and very much the culture, and I would say results of lots of trauma, particularly on the French people from where they came from up in Canada, many decades and millennia ago, that their response to the traumas they had experienced was to be very stoic. And so everything was very repressed. Everything was never talked about. And growing up around them, I just knew something was off as a child. And I started to open up about what might be possible for me in my path when I started noticing just people in the community who were suffering. And I was drawn to people who were suffering. And I think I was drawn because they seemed more real and authentic in their responses. I loved my family, but there was something deeper and more real and authentic with people who were suffering. And so as a young Catholic girl, I was hearing about love God, love your neighbor, and I learned to take that love neighbor in an extended way, not just who was next to you, but globally. And then as I grew more in the studies that I experienced in my own spiritual life, I really came to understand that we are already one, and we've just forgotten it. We carry the same stardust in ourselves. There's just no way any of us are not connected to everyone else. And so I really wanted to be figuring out a way to pay attention to that and those in pain. And eventually went to school to be a counselor and became a therapist. And I love therapy. I love the relationship, what it's like, how it transforms you and the person you're sitting with, all that comes with it. But I also did it from a spiritually integrated way. And so it was always, God was in the third chair. And it just was so powerful for me. And so I then went on to become a spiritual director and really learned to link together the clinical and the spiritual. And just blessedly in 2014, ended up meeting Reverend Liz Walker in the church where she was pastor in Roxbury Presbyterian Church in Boston, and her desire to really form some program that would respond to people's pain that we were seeing on their faces as they walked by the church. And so that just led to all these last 11 years and the ongoing years to come, where my focus will always be coming alongside people with traumatic stress, especially traumatic stress that's chronic and continues in their lives, and to become ever more someone who can help teach something about it and share something that will help the healing process. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. And we're going to be weaving these embodiment practices that Yilda talked about that she's been trained in throughout the webinar today. We're not just going to wait and do them at the end. So we're going to open this next section with the first one.
So one of the things I would love to begin with is breath. Breath is a tool that we have with us all the time. It's a gift we have. We don't really appreciate that this breath is always with us, and it's a tool that helps us, de-stress, move from stress activation to calm. So I would love for us to begin to sit in a comfortable position. I don't know if you're in a chair or laying down, but maybe you can sit comfortably and let go of anything in your hands. If you're holding your phone, maybe you put it on the side. So let your arms, your hands rest. And I want you to begin to feel your feet, your seat, your back touching the surface, to sense gravity holding you, to drop your shoulders, to soften the belly, and let your jaw unclench. And I want us to begin by placing the left hand on the heart and the right hand on the navel, on the belly. And if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. Eyes are the gates that connect us to the outer world. And by closing the eyes, we begin to connect inwards. If it's hard to close the eyes, then have your eyes half open. It's an invitation to disconnect from the outer into the inner. And I want us to begin to connect to our own breath without fixing or changing. We don't need to fix anything. Let's just begin to watch this life force traveling from the outer space into the body. Begin to notice if our breath is deep or shallow. Begin to notice how the breath is traveling. And I want you to take a moment to envision the lungs are like a big balloon. As you inhale the balloon, you fill the belly first, then the chest and the throat. And when you exhale, you empty the balloon, you bring everything out, let the body contract. So let us begin by inhaling deeply. We take slow inhalation and complete exhalation. Inhaling deeply, we can also add counting. We can inhale to 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do one more time. Inhale 2, 3, 4, and exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Come back to your normal breath. And just take a moment to notice the effects of this breath on the body, on the mind. Noticing if anything have changed. Breath is our anchor in times when we're afraid, frustrated, angry. Anchor to come back to the present moment, to be reminded that everything's okay right here, right now. And very slowly, when you're ready, and gently open your eyes.
Thank you, Ilda. Oh, I don't know about you, but that puts me in a good frame of mind to receive the information. Um, so this next part's going to be in 3 different sections to help us understand the impact of trauma and how we come alongside others. So the first question for Colleen is, what is important for people to understand about the effects of trauma on the body?
Thank you, Dana. And of course, a very big topic. What I'm going to try to do is to make it as simple as we can, because that's the best. I'm going to start first with the basic definition that we use to help people understand what we mean by trauma. And that it's as a response. Trauma is a response to something that's happening to you, that you're experiencing. And is 3 main things that we look for so that a person can decide themselves that they've had a traumatic experience. And that would be that you've experienced it as harmful or threatening, that it has lasting impacts on your life in many ways, and 3, that it's affecting your well-being and your functioning. So we need to be able to have the empowerment to know what's happened to us and that it really is traumatic. So today, since we are, as has been said earlier, focusing particularly on people who are experiencing trauma ongoing. It's not that you have an event and then you deal with it. It's events after events after events. So therefore, we're really looking at traumatic stress as chronic, something that people unfortunately are living with. And so ever since the 1970s, when Judith Herman wrote her book, Trauma and Recovery, people in the field have really seemed to follow her main 3 impacts. And I'm adapting them a little bit in the way that we explain it in our program. Number 1, you have a very big loss of safety and trust from what's happened. 2, you are disconnected. You're literally disconnecting in an experience in your body, which I'll talk about. And you're also having disconnection with others. And sometimes not only yourself, others, but also with God or your higher power. And thirdly, all of this causes what you might call a disorientation to your literal sense of purpose and meaning on this planet, which can really throw people and be some of the times the most difficult thing that people experience. And all of these things are happening to us physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and I think I said psychological, social, and spiritual. So when you're focusing on the body and the impacts on it to these ongoing events, you want to recognize that your stress response system's on overdrive. You are constantly having a stress response in your body. And think of that with hormones like adrenaline running through your body and cortisol, just constantly surrounding every organ, everything that's going on. Why? Because your body's feeling like it needs to be ready to act to stay safe. Secondly, that can cause your heart to be racing a lot. That can cause a lot of fatigue. And therefore, again, focusing on survival. And even sleep, as people have talked about, that, you're focusing on staying alert. Your body's believing you need to be alert for something coming. That can lead over time to a lot of physical pain people will have in their bodies and tension. And then lots of, unfortunately, across the time, because it's really unsustainable to live like this, you start to have more health issues and disease, particularly around your cardiovascular system and your nervous systems. And in the nervous system, your nervous system actually has a lower pain tolerance after a while, and all these symptoms keep coming up. So when we look at addressing this, in our program, with the model that we've created, one of the things that just magically, it seemed over time to come, really divinely ordered, I would say, by God, is that we called it a place, a presence, and a process. So all healing needs a place, a safe place, some kind of presence that we say is abiding, and a healing process of a journey across your life. So when we're talking about the body, I'm going to focus particularly on place for a minute. So when you're having ongoing traumatic events around you, any safety you can feel, I would say, is a relative safety. For that moment, you can feel safe. So you want to find relative safe places, and you want to be a relative safe place for others. And when you do that, you can have some relative stabilization, enough to start addressing things in your body. Bessel van der Kolk, in his book, Body Keeps the Score, highlights so much that for healing, you must release the traumatic stress in your body. Because the more it stays in there, that's what leads to that ongoing health issues and eventual disease. So from a simple way, you might think of addressing that. I loved when I learned this, because I realized that for all of us, we so easily can do these things. Crying is a release. Talking, and if you're telling your story, like in our program, people come and tell their stories, you're just emoting. Sometimes that's release of some stress. Sighing, taking like a, and being with what you're trying to release. Dancing, walking, running, swimming, those types of activities. But also when you start to get a little more focused on what you could be doing in a deeper way, you would do the breath work, such as Yilda did, all types of breath work like that particularly go right to that cardiovascular system, the nervous system, and address our sleep. Trauma healing centered yoga, Tai Chi is becoming in the field one of the main ways to literally be with what you're releasing in every body movement that you do. Pilates, resistance training, you get the idea. Really being mindful to address these things. And so that's a lot to have shared, but it really is the basics of what to understand as the impacts and what must happen in the healing of the releasing of that stress. And I'm going to turn it over to Yilda now, who's going to lead us in an embodied practice that we can take with us and use starting today.
Thank you, Colleen. As you said, trauma and emotions get stored in the body. That's what we call the psychosomatic experience. It's the connection between the psyche and the body. So there are many tools, as you also mentioned, that can be used. And one of them could also be, besides yoga and the movement, is shaking. There are a lot of studies that showed that shaking is a way to release the trauma from the body. And that's a study that was done also on animals. When they're afraid, after they freeze, they shake and they release the trauma from the body, and then they go on with their life. For us as humans, we used to do that when we were very young as kids, but as we grow older, we're afraid of what people would label us if we shake. But yeah, shaking, breath work, movement, anything that's related to the body. And today I want to share a very simple practice. It's called the finger hold to manage emotions. And this practice is a simple way to work with emotions by holding each finger, because emotions and feelings are like, we can imagine them like waves of energy moving through the body and the mind. So through each finger runs a meridian in the Chinese tradition that is connected to an organ system, related to an emotion in the body. So if we can also go back a little bit, maybe sometimes when we're stressed, we feel this in the stomach or in the shoulders. When we're afraid, sometimes we feel them in the knees, or, the body, the heart starts to tremble. So it's a big spectrum of emotions that are stored in the body. So through each finger runs a meridian connected to a different organ. And with strong and overwhelming feelings, these feelings or energy can get repressed in the body and blocked, resulting in what you mentioned as physical pain, congestion in the body. So holding each finger with breathing can really help release. It feels like a channel, it's a tool in daily life. It helps channeling these emotions outside of the body. So each finger is related to a certain emotion, and I'm not sure if we have enough time to do the practice itself, but I'm going to show you, and then maybe this is something you take as a practice with you. You can use with music to relax or go before going to bed. So to release the problems of the day and also bring some deep peace to the body and the mind. The practice is done. This is what I like about this practice is it's done on yourself, and also you can share it with your family members or others. So it's a simple tool of holding each finger for about 2 to 5 minutes. And it doesn't matter which hand you're using, but we can begin with the thumb. And using the thumb, the emotion that is related with this finger is actually tears and comfort. That's why we see little kids sucking their thumbs, because they're seeking comfort, and it's related to tears, to sadness. So when we're feeling sad, this is the finger that we can hold. And sometimes some people feel like trembling or warmth in the fingers. It's not about what you feel with the finger, but how you feel about it. So thumb finger is related to tears and emotional pain and grief. The index finger is related to fear and panic. So I don't know how about you guys in the US, but for us, when we want to frighten our kids and threaten them, that's the finger that we use. So it is related to fear and panic. So one of the tools I used to use with kids, also for myself, is when they're feeling afraid, they can hold the index finger. So for kids, just a quick note, for kids, it's 1 to 2 minutes. For adults, it's 2 to 5 minutes. So you can just hold it with music or without. Now, middle finger, we all know this. It's related to the emotion of anger. So when people are angry, they raise this finger. So we have a better way to release the anger from the body rather than just raising the finger in the face of someone else and then regretting the anger. So because anger is actually one of the emotions that gets us in a loop. Like when we're angry and then we feel ashamed that we were angry, and then we go into self-judgment. So it's a loop. So for anger, we can hold this finger, the middle finger. Now, when it comes to ring finger, some women and also men, they play with the ring if they're wearing one, and others, even if they're not wearing a ring, they can also still play with it. And ring finger is related to worry and anxiety. When we're worried and anxious, it comes like intuitively, we play with this finger. So we hold this finger when we're feeling anxious and worried. And for the pinky finger, it's related to lack of self-esteem. And basically, many times in life, especially when we were young as kids, we were told we're not good enough. And also for women in our community, like the voice of a woman is not usually heard. It's like, you don't know, like step aside. So this is related to our self-esteem. And so for this practice, holding your 5 fingers or helping someone else if they're upset or angry, you can also do it for them, holding their fingers. And it's very helpful for all of us, adults and kids, if they're having tantrum. It can also be used with people who are very afraid or sick, who cannot manage this. So again, holding these fingers with deep breathing, recognizing and acknowledging the strong emotions that are arising, the feelings, the disturbance. You hold each one of these fingers, you breathe out slowly, and you inhale slowly, and you let go. So it's an imaginary practice, but like you imagine also the fears or the tears, or sometimes these incidents can come up with every time you hold a finger. I myself, I'll quickly share, I don't want to run out of time. But I remember in one of my trainings, I had a lot of tears. I didn't know how to manage my tears. And I cried oceans in that training. So I remembered to hold this finger, and it was so helpful to me as a healthy way of connecting to my emotion, to the incident, and at the same time realizing that I have something that I can offer for myself and also for others. But these tools are like, when you're in the plane, you're asked to take care of yourself first so you can help others. So sorry, I went through it really fast without practicing, but I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilda. I think today is awareness. I loved the connection with sort of some of the things that we already somewhat know within ourselves, but this gives us a way to guide ourselves through a more intentional process. So thank you so much for helping us with that practice. So next we want to move on to, and again, Ilda set us up with this practice, is just, so how do we understand the impact of trauma on our emotions?
Yes, and I would also say it's a perfect bridge of the body and the nervous system, because we're really going to talk about the nervous system when we talk about emotions particularly, but they're all connected, of course. And all these impacts are happening at the same time. Remember that. So this nervous system impact is really because one of the things that a traumatic stress does is cause us to have difficulty, what you call regulating your emotion. And that's just a fancy word for saying being able to control it and feel like it's not controlling you, that you have some ability to control how you express your emotions over time. And you might say, well, why does that get so hard? It gets so hard because let's take ourselves to an initial, I won't give an example, but say an initial traumatic experience that's happening to you. Maybe multiple ones you're having, but at the initial of that specific one, again, in the beautiful way we're designed, our body needs to focus on staying safe. So it needs to not think about it before it moves, the body, right? And if we did think about it, it would be maybe too late to protect ourselves. So the front part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, goes offline. So that's our planning and thinking center. So we do not have the ability to think or a plan. Our body just goes into that automatic responses to keep us safe, which is what we need in that beginning time. The problem comes up when we've had a disconnect there, which means that we really haven't recorded any words to our experience. So we've got all these symptoms in our body that are happening as a result of the experience, all our systems, all the ways that we're having trouble in some way with the impact of this traumatic experience. And so these symptoms, think of them as sort of like all firing off in different ways without a centralized understanding in our planning and thinking. The good news is eventually we can get that back online and connected if we pay attention to healing. But in the time that we're not, often you'll find that people's emotions, and I'm going to describe the big impacts of that, they're not even aware it's connected to the trauma sometimes, which is where we get in trouble thinking that we're just so bad. Why are we acting like this? With no sense of why, unless we have some education about it. So I want you to think about, ideally, we would be able to live in a calm state, right? Ideally. And we certainly want to get back to that calm state as much as possible, no matter what's going on. And so it's kind of known in the field now as window of tolerance. In other words, I can tolerate things. I'm feeling calm. But what happens with trauma is we end up going either above that window or below. And if you kind of go above that window with your symptoms, that's when you find yourself what they call hypoaroused. You're aroused beyond what is sustainable. So that's where you might be angry. You might have outbursts. You might be irritable, agitated, always on alert, just really spastic almost, so that you can't be in a calm state. And so we need to recognize when we get like that. Or you could go below that window of tolerance where you're completely shut down, where you see someone who's numb, like no expression on their face or affect, just not talking, disconnected to everything and everyone, just very shut down. Again, not sustainable health-wise. Either one of those, above or below, is part of what gets us to that chronic health problems. So you might realize that think about yourselves and maybe others that you know who have no understanding of what I've just said, where it's coming from and why it's so important to address. And so, think also of the psychological, social, environmental experiences when you're above or below the line, how you're not connecting with people, how people are turning away from you, how you may be treated because of those behaviors with not only not you understanding, but not them. So you might say, well, how do I actually address that then? The first thing is you've got to pay attention to it and notice it. So that's really a very much mindful kind of practice. You need to be saying to yourself, gee, I'm going to notice when I'm upset. I'm going to try to notice when I'm upset or when I check out. And if you notice it and you're actually looking at your behavior, who's looking at it? It's your true essence. So you're actually out of it. And then you can actually address it. And the way to address it, all the research is showing this, is, and it was mentioned earlier by Ilda in her initial breath work, being present and staying in the present moment. When we do that, it is impossible for us to be triggered, because we are not allowing ourselves to be taken back to what's happened. Or as I say, the worst kinds of traumatic stress are when we think about what could happen and we imagine all kinds of worse things. So we're really staying in the present moment. And if you can learn to be mindful, do mindfulness practices, and I'll mention a couple ways of doing that simply, the more you do that, the more you'll be able to get yourself back out of that upper or lower and in that tolerance. Again, relative for the time that you can. Now that obviously you might hear that and say, wow, then that's really a call to live from present moment to present moment to present moment. It really is. And how much have we heard that throughout science for years now and never really paid attention to it perhaps, but it really is the main way to address the emotional impact of trauma. And so in one way, if it's happening to you and you're having trouble getting to the present moment in a way or a practice that you've designed, just try pushing your feet into the ground. Feeling the ground beneath you, the table that you're sitting at. Focus on something in the room. I'm here now. Those are, or an object that you carry with you, that you hold on to and press into in a way that reminds you, right now, I'm here. I'm not there. I'm here. And a spiritual way I like to call upon all of us to remember is the body is not designed to torture you. These impacts, they're designed to keep you safe. So so good internal talk with God or higher power, however you understand that, to be able to say, I am beautifully designed. This impact is not to be hated or pushed to some side or try to, push it out of me. It's more to honor that it's trying to do this. And then I'm going to work with it to say, thank you, but I don't need to be brought back. That is not happening in this very moment. And I want to stay here and be with the people around me, with the nature, with God, however you want to understand that. So you see, you can make up all kinds of creative ways that help you stay in that present moment so that you're not getting taken away and building, again, a potential more health impacts on your body and spirit, mind. And I turn it over to Yelda and Dana.
Thank you, Colleen. I've always said that the body is a living miracle. It does all kinds of stuff when we're not even aware of that. Like the heart that is beating, the breath, we take everything for granted. And yes, breath is actually one of the first things that brings us back to the present moment. That's why I called it the anchor. It anchors you in the present moment where everything right now feels good, feels okay. And so the idea behind all of such practices is to realize that what happened in the past for this traumatic experience, we cannot change that. What we can change is our reaction to what happened in the past. And that's when, awareness brings change. You cannot change what you're not aware of. So that's the first step, becoming aware of the situation, the trauma itself, because many people live, as you said, they're either above or below. They don't even know what's happening to them. So awareness is the key to change. And so as we speak about the body and also how it's related to our the safety and psychologically, we all seek, as you mentioned, Colleen, a safe space. We all look for being in a safe space, and it's not always attainable. It's not always there for us to have a safe space to be at. But through a tool that's called visualization, which I'm going to lead us in now, there's this tool that anchors ourselves in sensation of safety and strength. So I invite us again to sit in a comfortable position. If you would like to close the eyes, then it's an option, if it feels good to you. And to just begin to feel the body that's seated. And I want us to bring to mind a person, a place, or a memory where you felt deeply safe. It can be an actual place you visited before, an actual memory, a real person, or an imaginary one. So don't think too much, whatever pops in your mind. And I want us to notice how the body feels as you visualize this place. Maybe warmth in your chest, softness in your face, release in your breath, restfulness and ease. Just notice how your body feels. And now shift your awareness to how you feel in that place. Happy, relaxed, just notice. Let that sense grow more in the next few breaths. Return to this place whenever you need it. This is your internal safe space. Thank you. When you're ready, if your eyes are closed, you can open your eyes.
Thank you, Hilda. Oh, imagining a safe space. How important that we need to sort of understand where that place is in our lives and how we can find that when we need it. So we're drawing into the final segment of our webinar today, where we really want to, we've been talking about the awareness that's needed for change in ourselves in order to be able to address the stress in our body. And now we want to learn how to recognize, and that will help us in terms of recognizing stress in others in order to support them. So we want to learn how to embody these practices, what we've learned from Colleen, in a way that we can come alongside people who are hurting. So how do we do that, Colleen?
So it's fascinating. As I was preparing for this part today, I just realized how important it is to say, you know, we have to first notice how we're regarding the other person. It starts there. So if you're seeing someone who's above that line, acting, you know, agitated and all kinds of things, or shut down, you know, we're human. We might notice that we feel more of a desire to walk away or a rejection of a sort. And we end up wondering what's wrong with them. And that's always the incorrect way to approach this. The way to approach this is to wonder what happened to them. You know, literally, that should be the first thought. I wonder what happened to lead someone to this state they're in, or to what's happening. And that means even in any behaviors that are seriously needing to be stopped, you know, or someone's harming someone. We also have to remember, we have to wonder what's happened to them. And that helps us put in the mindset for sort of the best practices of being with people and trying to walk with them. Number one, I would say the most important thing to know is that relationship is the pathway of healing. How you are in relationship with someone, the fact that we need to have some kind of relationship, whether it's a temporary one or a long-term one, this connection with people, that people who are really suffering from so much of the impacts of trauma, you know, when you often ask them, obviously they'll say different reasons that are different impacts that are the worst for them. But if you listen, the one you'll hear that has the most resonance is that they're isolated and alone, and that there's no one, and then therefore they're tumbling into no hope and even worse sense of meaning and purpose. So if we understand that just being with not having to fix. That's not the point. Being with, being present, coming alongside, accompaniment. And as we say in our work, even if it's temporary or long term, that you are abiding with them in that time. You're remaining with them. It's literally from scriptures. And that we are remaining in a way that we are completely, fully present with them. If we do that, I'm going to say we would do 90% of what we needed to do to help. In some cases, 100 perhaps. So how you might do that in your approach is to lead with compassion and empathy. And I would say not sympathy. Sympathy is something that actually can be a way of finding ourselves saying, well, at least this didn't happen to you, as a response, that type of sympathetic response. Or don't worry, you'll feel better someday. Those are honest responses, but we need to just be with where people are in their pain and be empathetic with it and compassionate. Lead with love. Just lead with love and kindness. Suspend your judgment. Sometimes that might be hard, but do your best to suspend your judgment and to give unconditional positive regard. Unconditional. No matter what's happened, you will regard them with dignity and positivity in terms of their being, and respect them. Going a little deeper in your actions, be consistent. If you say you're going to do something and trustworthy, if you say you're going to do something or go somewhere, do it. And do it again and again and again. Because for so many people, that's what they expect, is that people won't, depending on the kinds of traumas that they've experienced. And so right there, you're being present and consistent and trustworthy and loving. I mean, you can't, that's the package, right? When you're with them, listen. Listen, listen, listen. Less words, more listening. Understanding that they already have strength, perseverance, desire for healing, and wisdom. You don't need to give it to them. They have it. Just honor it and help it come from within them. And always remember, people are doing the best they can. It may not be good enough societally or whatever, under the rules of wherever you're operating, but they are doing the best they can. And that means wonder about this. Sometimes they may be, it's more of a can't, that they can't do something, not a won't. And you can actually assume that until you know for sure. The symptoms that they are showing you that are so difficult to be with are there for a reason and have helped them somehow. So you would never want to take away a symptom without something else that you're together helped them to use instead or do instead. Regulate your emotions if you're expecting them to regulate theirs. And all these behavioral problems that we look at in children, adults, whatever, are somehow connected to an unmet need. And I'm going to respond again with that. I'm going to say that again. All behavioral problems are somehow connected to an unmet need. It may even be that that unmet need is the absolute foundational one we all struggle with that Yilda mentioned earlier, that someone's told us we're not good enough. We all get that message somehow. It's kind of the universal human worst scenario. Maybe I am not worthy. Maybe I am not good enough. Maybe there's something really awful about me. Again, practice, be the place, the presence, and the process assistant, if you will, accompaniment. Just think of those 3 Ps. I can be that for other people. I don't have to have a program to do it. I can be that. And that the last thing I'll say is for yourself, because it's always about your own healing, oxygen mask, as Yilda said, as well as others that you're aiming to assist. Wonder about if a relationship is the pathway of healing, are there any of the 3 main ways we need that missing? Am I relating to God, to my higher power? Then I need to attend to that if I'm not in relationship and turning to that relationship. The second one is I need some safe person that I can share the most with, a one-on-one. And if I don't have that, I'm going to look for that. And third, we all need some kind of communal experience of relationship and connection. And again, if you don't have that, look for one and help others to do that. So thank you very much for listening.
Wow. So many helpful thoughts. Lead with compassion meet people where they are, believe they have in themselves what they need for the journey, and they just need somebody to accompany them in that process. So thank you, Colleen. Wow, beautiful, beautiful thoughts. So Ilda, before you lead us in a final embodiment practice to kind of close out this webinar today, again, the goal for this is actually to help people understand trauma and resilience in any context. But we are specifically have invited people to this webinar because we're trying to understand what it's like to experience things within the Palestinian context. So has there been anything today that has stood out to you that you think particularly speaks to where you and the other women and families are experiencing what's happening right now in Palestine, the West Bank, and Gaza?
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Colleen. What really stood out to me today is understanding, for all of us to really understand that trauma is not only described as an individual experience, but also as a collective and intergenerational one. And for prolonged exposure to violence, humiliation, and loss, the effects it has on people's sense of safety and identity, especially when people live under, like here in Palestine, continuous threats, continuous uncertainty. And this strongly connects with what's happening in Palestine, that trauma here is not a single event, it's ongoing. And this explains how generations can carry the effects of violence and loss, not only through memory, but really through daily lived reality. And another important point that was raised today is that healing cannot really happen separately from justice and acknowledgement and accompaniment. And that recovery for me requires a more than just coping mechanisms. It requires conditions where people can live in dignity and security when thinking about long-term healing. And I feel, this is a great reminder also that amid all of this ongoing trauma, resilience does exist. And finding strength through culture, solidarity, like what we're doing today, storytelling, even in the context of a prolonged trauma and difficult circumstances, people do continue to create, to connect, to sustain hope, like what we're doing right now. And I'll have the final practice together, and I would say, I thought of gratitude. It's easy to wake up, in the morning thinking about what's missing and what needs to be fixed and what's overdue. But gratitude is a tool to flip the script. And starting the day in appreciation makes a big difference to all of us. Not because life is perfect, not because we don't suffer any trauma, but because gratitude trains the mind to notice the abundance instead of lack. So when we begin the day grateful, we move differently. We're less reactive, more patient, and more confident. Many people, and this is a practice that I have learned, starting the day with listing 3 things you're thankful, grateful to. This is not fluffy. It's strategic because gratitude reduces cortisol in the body, the stress hormone, and it increases dopamine, the motivation to begin the day. So I'll just finish the session today by inviting us to take a moment to begin, maybe again, close the eyes if this feels good to you, feels comfortable. To begin to breathe slowly and deeply. And to bring to your mind 3 things you are grateful to right now. They don't have to be fancy or big. 3 things you're grateful to. Maybe picturing the faces of someone you love. Grateful to moments, to comforts you're lucky to have. Might seem like a little step, but it's very important. Maybe the roof on your top, maybe the clean water you have, maybe the food, the shelter, the life, the heart, the breath, whatever that is to you, 3 things that you're grateful to. And now bring a little smile to yourself, reassuring yourself that no matter the challenges, the difficult times, we are blessed and we are held in the arms of a compassionate God, that we are all created in the image of God. And gently, when you're ready, open your eyes. And I am deeply grateful for this gathering, for each one of us that showed up today here, for being open to receive, to listen, to be here supporting each other. I'm grateful to community and to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilda. I am deeply grateful to the three of you for being here and for sharing your wisdom and your hearts. And I know that this topic is a hard topic. It's weighty, and it's something I think that a lot of people don't want to take the time to slow down for. It's really easy to stuff our stuff, to stuff our emotions, and to just keep moving. And it takes a lot of courage to show up in this space. So thank you all for your courageous example. I'm grateful for that. And yeah, just thank you all for being here today. The final session of this webinar series will be next Thursday at 12 Eastern, where we will talk about lament. And then we'll go through a compassion practice, like a grief practice. So also another practical tool to equip people with. And then also, as I mentioned last week, we are beginning to prepare for our 2026 And Still We Rise Summit. We are just in the beginning stages, so I don't have details to share with you yet, but just wanted to put that out there for everybody so you can start thinking about how to join us in solidarity next year. All right. Thank you all so much, and hope to see you next week.